but yeah, I've been doing it. You inspired me. And it's been really fun. And I'm so into it now. I do more readings for myself.
Mhm.
And
It really does. I feel like tarot um, builds upon itself. It's like a yoga practice. Like
mhm,
I feel a little awkward the first week, but then you start to see tarot outside of the tarot reading. Tarot likes to count, so you'll see if you pull a six of something, you'll see like a six of wands and all these other ways. And
mhm,
it's like your muscle for tarot can build very quickly, but it takes that daily work.
mhm.
And then when I separated from tarot, like I haven't pulled tarot cards in probably a couple of weeks. I'll pull them every once in a while, or if somebody asks me, a question, I'll pull some. But
Yeah.
like I pulled some for this reading, and it was such a joy to do it. It's like, oh, I haven't
Mhm.
done that in a while, and so it inspires you to kind of do it more because I feel like it's just a practice that really builds quickly upon itself. And like tarot is always ready for you, whether you're ready for it or not. It's always ready for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. We're definitely keeping that in because that's been my thing. I've been because I've been working with it for years. But this is the first time I've really studied it like this.
Yeah.
And it's just been really like empowering in a way,
Yeah.
Like I've been enjoying it thoroughly. So thank you again for that inspiration. Because that it's been wonderful. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Name a Pod. Today I'm being joined by a very special guest and a dear friend, the one and only Christa DeMaio. Yay! In addition to working in the natural foods industry for the past 24 years, she now owns her own natural products brokerage, sorry, serving the Southeast. She does volunteers for food rescue, school enrichment, and she serves on the board of directors at the French Broad Co-op, where we met in the first place. Yay, Co-op. She's also the wife of Drunken Prayer. We'll get into that in a different episode because that's going to be fun. She is also a mother to a very sweet little boy who shares his Lego with his friends, like me. And she's a musician in her own right, also an outstanding photographer, and she documents her family's travels and their many adventures as they move around the country. Um, if all of that doesn't sound like a full enough plate, Christa is also a studied and gifted astrologer known as Practical Astros. Like many of us who are curious, her interest in astrology began as a young teenager, and she purchased her first book on sun signs when she was 15. Her interest peaked again about 10 years later when she met a dear friend who gave her her first astro readings and began taking classes with him. Flash forward to now, where for the past several years, she has delved into her personal studies with a quote, insatiable hunger. And in 2022, she enrolled in her first traditional astrology class, becoming certified the following year. She now continues her studies. She's currently in 3 advanced courses, again, so much on this woman's plate, and has begun to share this passion through her work with her clients. She read for over 50 clients last year and is working on building her practice. As she said, this is where I love to be. I love to share astro insights and encouraging people to get a handle on using astrology practically, hence Practical Astros. And she even helped me pick my first tarot deck and inspired my own studies, very much indeed so. So today, we are going to talk about her astrology work, its practical applications, and how it can inform us in our daily lives. So Christa De Maio, thank you for being here, sweetie.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So I want to start about talking about like how you got into astrology in the first place when you're a kid. Like I know a lot of us like, will like see the horoscope in the paper, something like that. And, you kind of get maybe a little interested in it. But like, what was it for you that kind of like made you really just want to go out and like buy a book?
Rebellion.
Nice.
Yeah. So, my parents, I grew up in a very religious family church, went to church twice on Sundays and on Wednesdays and did lots of volunteer work with the church. And, um, you know, uh, church was integral to growing up. And as a teenager, It's your natural response to be a foil to what your parents teach you as your way of like defining yourself as an adult. I mean, it's human nature to rebel so that you can figure things out on your own. It's part of the process of growing up. And I mean, I can look at, my own astrological chart. I'll call it the nativity because it's easier to say that than birth chart or astro chart because I'll be using that word a lot.
Yeah.
In my own nativity, I can totally see where my fascination with just religion and spiritual places, that's like my happy place. Like find me in a Buddhist temple or a Catholic church or a holy site or a well, in Ireland. I mean, like
Yeah.
those locations of where people gather to honor the sacred in whatever language and form they choose. I really do love that. And so I'm thankful for growing up in a religious family because I feel like it kind of helped me build a framework for the best things about Christianity because there's lots of really good lessons in Christianity. It gets
That's right.
convoluted when the humans in the church put their egos and power in front of the teachings of treating others like you want to be treated and
That's
living with
right.
compassion. And so with that, I'm also a kind of a scavenger, and so I started thrift store shopping very early on. And I found a Linda Goodman Sun Signs book in a thrift shop, and I still have the very copy of that I bought.
Nice.
And I read it, and it's like I flipped through it a few months ago, and I was just cracking up because I completely do not love that book anymore. I mean, it's like so cheesy, but
Yeah.
the way she writes is very bright, and she always puts an Alice in Wonderland quote in front of each chapter, and
Oh,
it like instills these archetypes. And the best way that I feel like astrology can be used is to teach us more about the archetypes of life and the
yeah.
characters that we play and that we interact with, and putting it in a framework of um, being able to kind of understand it and have compassion. I feel like astrology and reading for other clients has given me so much compassion for the human experience because it is not all good and it's not all bad. And if you can have some sort of um, different perspective to look at things that have happened to you or things that you participated in, it just builds compassion. And yeah, that's kind of where I started. It was just like this seemingly random, purchase in a thrift store. I actually had a reading yesterday, Thursday, with one of my favorite astrologers. His name is Nick Dagan Best, and he actually knew my first teacher. They were friends.
Oh, cool.
So I was kind of explaining this to him about how I bought my first book in 1995, and he was like, "That's so funny because you had a Mars return right around then, and
Oh, really?
Mars is my chart ruler. I'm a Scorpio rising, and in traditional astrology, Mars rules Scorpio." And so to have like a return of any planet is kind of the completion of a cycle and the beginning of a new one. So like your
Oh,
solar
okay.
return is like your sun's returning back to the same point it was when you were born. But you have lunar
Okay.
returns every month. You have Venus returns, Mercury returns. People sometimes might be familiar with the doom infused Saturn return. It's
Yeah.
but a Mars return for me kind of meant the beginning of a new cycle, and so it was a cycle that I had not considered before. But it's like, oh, that put me on my path, you know.
Wow, that's really interesting. See, this is why I'm glad we're having this conversation because this is precisely the type of thing that I want to get into. So when you're talking about like this first book that you got when you're a kid, and when you look at it now, it seems a little, you know. Um, that being said, with all those different sources out there, um, and especially now, because when we were little girls, there probably was maybe a quarter of the amount of books on this stuff available that there is today, 20 some odd years later, right? So, how do you kind of filter through this stuff? It can be difficult, for people who are getting interested and maybe want to start their own studies to even know where to start. Like, what kind of advice would you give on that?
Well, I kind of feel like the a lot of the arguments against astrology are it's not real, it's a pseudoscience, blah, 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 blah. My position is that astrology is divination, and there is no wrong way to get into it, right? Now, when you say, like, yes, there's lots of books about it now, part of the reason why there's lots of books about it now is I'll give a really truncated history lesson. So you have cosmologies of every indigenous peoples on Earth because we as humans find comfort in patterns. We like things to be as we expect. And so, the only storytelling that you could really continue for millennia is the story of the stars, because wherever you are on Earth, we see the same stars, right? So we develop a cosmology about it. And there's a thing called the precession of the equinoxes, which makes the position of the stars now not in the place that they were 3,000 years ago, right? But the archetype is still the same. And so a long time ago, there was a man named Ptolemy, and he wanted to legitimize astrology more to the scientific community. And so there was this argument that astrology is a causal science, meaning like gravity exists. So if I drop my phone, it's going to land on the ground. And that argument of like the planets are forcing you or causing you through some sort of natural elements to make you make choices is, I feel like, where things really splintered away from the divinatory aspect of astrology. And now a lot of people don't agree with me. They do believe that there is some natural force. And I could be completely wrong. I feel like it might even be a blend. But I just say that because I just don't feel like there's a wrong way to get into it. I feel like everybody's path is their own path. And so if you get through astrology and you find Hellenistic astrology, or you find Vedic astrology, or you find, Jungian astrology, whatever path you are, that's your path. There's no wrong way to do it. So what happened in the history of astrology is that there's this moment in time where you had lots of famous astrologers, and a lot of the original texts were written fairly close together. And they say that there's this argument of there's this one man called Hermes Trismegistus, and it means thrice great Hermes or thrice great Mercury. And they don't know if it was a collection of a bunch of philosophers or if it was one man. But from that, there were all of these kind of revealed, intricate, very beautifully harmonious teachings of astrology. And they were in Greek. And then through time, those teachings kind of moved to the Middle East, and they were influenced that way. There was more added to it and developed. And then over time, a lot of those translations just were lost. They were lost to English speakers. And so they were ancient texts that had not been translated. And in the 1990s, there were these basically these historians that were working on translating ancient texts. And a few of them happened to be astrological texts. And so they started to translate those and revealed this thousands plus year old traditional astrology, like whole theory that had never been revealed to modern man. And so there's this revival of ancient Hellenistic teaching that had been lost. And so before that had happened, you had little like pieces of astrology teachings that had kind of gone through, like Carl Jung was a big astrologer, and he incorporated astrology in his practice. And you had people like Gurdjieff, and you had lots of Aleister Crowley, and all that big revolution of all those thinkers in the turn of the century to the 20s and beyond that kind of developed what is now modern astrology. And it's a lot of just psychological, there's, I have judgments against it because how I see it is, nothing bad ever happens. It's all like how you manipulate things. And it's, it's not just that, but that's kind of what I had studied. That's what I read. That's what the Linda Goodman Sun Sign book was modern astrology. And They're like, I wouldn't recommend somebody start there because that area of astrology developed kind of on its own and in the dark because it wasn't based on source text. But if that's
Right.
what you are, if that's what resonates with you, then don't listen to anybody else but yourself. Because there are some
Hmm.
people that find that. And if you're using it as a divinatory practice, then that's between you and your daimon or your good spirit or your connection with the divine. And there's no astrologer with as many years under their belt that should tell you you're doing it wrong. Like
Right.
there's definitely techniques of Hellenistic astrology, and there's rulerships and there's specific things that were clearly documented, but how you interpret that is really that's where the human element and the individual spirit really comes into play.
See, I like that because that was actually something I wanted to ask you about it, and I love that you just kind of went there anyway. Because like basing a modern understanding on a traditional versus kind of coming into it on your own. And I find that in tarot a lot too, because as we were talking about before we got started, I've been working on my tarot studies and um, I have a traditional weight deck and I have my Green Witch deck that you so aptly knew needed to belong to me. Um, and I also have this really beautiful one called the Herb Crafters Tarot. And what I love about it, these women are Hispanic. The woman's name is, the author's name is Letitia Guthrie. And the way that they interpreted the tarot, I thought was really interesting. Like, for example, the page becomes an Iha. She's a daughter. So the queens are madres,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, I'm forgetting the Spanish words now, but the knights are warriors and the kings are healers. Um, and rather than going through each book by or each suit, rather like in their guidebook, they go by the number. So, and the suits are labeled by their elements rather than cups and swords, and
Right. Yeah.
so it's water and fire and air and earth. Um, and they don't read reversals in
I
their
don't read
practice.
reversals.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Because and what I love about it is thank you for saying that too, because I know some people think that's weird. But part of what I've been learning in my study and especially reading into like the Herb Crafters Tarot a little bit more is that part of the reason they don't read reversals is kind of like akin to what you were just saying a minute ago about how uh it's all good or it's all bad. And they're like, no, it's not. Like, it's all together.
Yeah.
So, you want to take the full scope of what's being presented to you. And if you're being honest with yourself, you'll admit, like, it's not just all the good stuff over here. It's like, oh yeah, no, I gotta work on this,
Yeah.
And when I did my maybe we can get into this actually, because when I did my birth chart tarot
Mm-hmm.
based on the major uh, I always want to I
Canon.
always want to say Arnica. I do. It's so funny. Arcana, the major arcana. Um, so the 22 cards, obviously, you and I both know, some listeners might not, so I'll just kind of spit it out real quick. The 22 cards of the major arcana are all associated with either a planet or an astrological sign. So you can lay out those 22 cards in your birth chart. Everyone will use every single one of those cards, so that you can kind of see where your cards are. And they do speak to those archetypes that you were talking about before, as of course, because that would be one of the major connections, I think, between the tarot and astrology, is that they do lay out those archetypes for us. And we all have a bit of it. It's just kind of, but we're all, just organized a little bit differently, if you will. So, but yeah, I thought that was really interesting because when you look at your birth chart with the tarot like that, of course you're not pulling the cards upside down. You're just looking at the meaning of the cards. So the way
Yeah.
that I wrote it in my journal was like it's this versus this,
Hmm.
So it's like because a lot of the cards will give you a upright and a reversed
Yeah.
meaning, right? So the way I noted it down was it's this versus this. So it's like, this is your good day. This is you on a bad day. You know, like, I
Well,
mean,
and I don't really, I don't blame anybody for reading reversals because again, it's
mm,
a divinatory act, so it's your language with these visual
yeah,
prompts.
yeah,
If
yeah.
I pull a reversal, I might look at it and just immediately turn it around. I might look at it
Hmm.
and be like, I need to look at this card from just a different perspective. What I don't do is I don't take the meaning of the card and do a 180 from it. And I think that's what a lot of
Right.
read
Yeah,
reversals. I just,
yeah.
for me, it's the uh, the tower upside down. It's still the fucking tower, you know.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is
Like I'm not going to
exactly.
be like exploding upwards, hopefully, you know.
No, yeah.
They're
Yeah, exactly.
my favorite tarotista is Susan Chang, and I have every single one of her books now. But she wrote 36 Secrets about the minor decans, the minor arcana, which associate with the astrological decans. And what a decan is decan just means 10 in Greek. And so if you
Yeah,
like Aries, like the first like 0 to 9 degree Aries is the first decan. And then 10 to 19 is the second, and then is that right? 20 to 29 is the third decan. And so
right.
there's a tarot card that is so the decans are ruled by certain planets, and
Yeah.
but then each decan has its own tarot card, so there's an association with it. So she wrote a book about
Oh,
that. But
neat.
she has a podcast called Fortune's Wheelhouse, and they go through every single card. They go through every single number. They go through every single planet. They go through everything single suit. She's amazing, and she has what she calls sympathetic magic. And so I'll give the example of tarot. So when I first did a pull, I pulled 2 cards in a day over a period of time until and I would write down and write what I had. And so I pulled the tower card once. And I remembered this from a class that I took with her. She would, if she pulled a difficult card like the 5 of coins or the tower, she would, or like the 9 of swords,
Yeah.
she would do this like kind of sympathetic magic. And when she had done it, she would like announce to the universe the requirements have been fulfilled. Like
Yeah.
no need to tower my day. I've just done this. And her trick for the tower was, the image of it is like there's people falling down, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
she crawled head first down a flight of steps. And then when she was at the bottom of the steps, she jumped up and said, the requirements have been fulfilled. And so I did that when I pulled the tower that day. And
Nice.
I looked like a crazy person, crawling down my stairs outside while people were driving past. But I was like, I don't care. I don't need my world to crash down right now.
Nope, I have touched the
And,
ground. I'm good.
and if what is kind of crashing down is my ego because I don't care that my neighbors are seeing me, then that be my tower moment. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I love that. That is awesome.
I love tarot for that. I read tarot for people, but I use it as a way to talk about astrology mostly
Hmm.
because I'm more versed in reading symbols that way.
Yeah.
I can read tarot, you know, uh, just as a reader, but I lean into the astrology because I have that repository of information of what these cards traditionally mean, but
Hmm.
then also reading it in the moment of like what is it speaking to you? Because I've read for people where they see a certain card, like the 5 of coins. To me, that's one of the hardest cards in my chart.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I look at it, the 5 of coins is just a really difficult image. And this woman was like, I feel like I need to stay home to take care of someone. And I was like, that's what you got out of that car. Like I wouldn't have gotten that. And she
Yeah.
did. Like 10 days later, her husband was hospitalized and she had to stay and take care of her husband.
Oh my goodness.
So
Yeah.
the fact that
Jeez.
she recognized that, she had the
Yeah.
sense, it was like an out of the blue thing. It wasn't like he was sick and maybe he would be hospitalized. It's like the alchemy in the conversation revealed something to her that it was not mine to see, but it was hers to see. And I like tarot for that reason, because people respond to visuals, and they can start or prompt a conversation through the visuals in a way easier. I feel like tarot is an easier, approachable way to engage in the divine, whatever you want to call it, than astrology is. Now, I've met plenty of tarot people who be like, man, astrology, people are way more forgiving of astrology, and us astrologers are like, man, people are way more forgiving of tarot.
Yeah.
Like, treated like we're these, like, you know, I don't know, energy vampires, but it's like,
Yeah.
don't feel, you know.
I mean, I've done readings for friends and I've done readings for family members. And like here down in Georgia, we have a 15-year-old niece. She's super cool. And she'll have sleepovers with us sometimes. We'll watch movies, make popcorn, play some games, have fun. But she's a wicked smart kid. She's super cool. And she was checking out my altar one night. She's like, and it's so cute because sometimes she calls me auntie and sometimes she just calls me Miss Andrea, the little Southern girl thing, right? And so she's like, Miss Andrea, would you read tarot cards for me? And I
Aw,
was like, yeah, sweetie, do you want to give it a go? And so of course I let her pick which deck she wanted to use because I have options. And she chose the Green Witch. And we did a little tarot reading and it was so cute because I did this reading for her and she was like, yeah, I really am having a problem with this dude at school. Like he's being such a pain. It was so funny. Like she's like, I know who that is.
yeah,
And she like, and I was like, see, because I don't know who that is. This
yeah,
is your reading, right?
yeah,
So it's like, I just know that you're having a little problem here.
yeah,
You want to talk about it? I'm your aunt. Like,
yeah.
but it was good. And then uh for um for Christmas, my sister-in-law, her mom, um she had never had a tarot reading before and she asked me if I would do one for her and we did one and she was like, wow, nail on head, and I find that when I have had those experiences with friends and family members, um it makes me feel good about my study too because I've been working really hard to try to be more in tune with it, just generally speaking. But when you see other people who may be a little skeptical or be like, yeah, she reads tarot cards, but like it's kind of cool, whatever. But then that you do a reading for them and then they're like, oh, no
Yeah.
shit. Right. Like, and I love that because it's a good way to uh damper some of that skepticism, I think.
Mm. Yeah,
Because yeah,
like
I feel the
reading.
same way. It's like, oh, you read tarot? And
Yeah,
like, and you're like, oh God, I read the stars. Oh, well, it's like,
yeah,
no,
I
we actually
love
we're
I like
onto something here.
watching people's eyes glaze over when I, talk about astrology. It's like it's one of like my party tricks. Like, oh, okay. But
Yeah.
talking, and then, and I can be kind of like the bad witch and be like, oh, Capricorn, how are your knees? Like just do very
Oh yeah.
general things. Um, but honestly, like I love skeptics, like just in general. I like people that don't operate under a general consensus about anything. I like people that, like, they keep their minds fresh by just like asking questions, and those are my favorite people to read for and read with, because they usually have a very sharp mind, and some of them just want to prove you wrong, and
Mhm.
whatever. But ultimately, I think skeptics are just incredibly curious people, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I think curiosity might kill the cat, but it keeps humans alive, and
Yeah, yeah.
to read for people that, quote, don't believe. It's like, well, I mean, just on a archetypal level, there are these. So you have the major arcana that start with the Fool and go all the way through, and you have all of the, like you said, all the planetary representation. And but if you just look at the 22 cards, the major arcana, it's 21, and the Fool is the 0, so it's like the beginning,
Right.
right? And
Beginning and the end. Yeah.
And the major arcana represent all of life, and all of life
Mhm.
is not great, and all of life is not horrible. It's a blend. So having that in the minor arcana, the ones that are, a court card, so like a king, queen, page, or princess, or knight. And then you have the number cards. So you have 2 to 10 of all the suits. So you have fire is wands, cups are water, coins or pentacles are earth, and swords are air. And so
Mhm.
that gives more detail, but you just in the 22 arcana, you have all of life in there. So of course, if you
Mhm.
just pulled major arcana, that can speak to so many things that every person has a touch point on. Um,
Yep. Yeah.
so just speaking to people, it's like, if I pull the Fool card or the Hanged Man for you, I can talk to you about it. You don't have to believe me that I'm saying the hanged man is X, Y, and Z. I can just talk to you about it and see what comes up for you, because seeing a picture of something usually kind of conjures an emotion or something you're thinking about. I don't know. Like that's why I feel like it's more approachable, because I'll talk to people about astrology, and like today there's a Mercury Mars conjunction. So like Mercury Mars are together, but it's such an abstract thing because in my mind I'm like, okay, I know what it means instantly. And
Yeah.
but people are like, I don't have a reference point for, I know that they're both planets, but they don't
Yeah.
immediately see Mars as like this energizing, he's considered a malefic because he cuts, and Mercury as like this trickster that can be back and forth of being good or bad. He likes to go between worlds, but he's like the chatty Cathy. And if you have like the Cathy and like the planet of war together, like there's going to be some
Yeah.
arguments today.
Yeah.
People are going to cut with their words. And
Yeah.
I think it's just harder for people to abstractly grasp that, because it's information, it's words, it's not like a picture that immediately conjures up something. Regardless of language, tarot has the images, but in astrology you have to have, astrology is a language in itself, and hiring an
Yeah.
astrologer helps you translate your nativity into a language that you can understand. It puts it into, it deciphers what the significations of the planets and the houses and the aspects when two planets kind of see each other. It's complicated,
Yeah.
it's hard to kind of just dive in. I wanted to say, if you wanted to get into astrology, I'll tell you what I would not suggest doing. I would not use the CoStar app at all,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
I feel like that app has taught people wrong information, mostly that they don't have a second house, or they don't have blah blah blah. I would just use the Channing app or other
Which
astrological.
I love.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Channing app is excellent, but the CoStar
It's
app,
really good.
it's mostly wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like how it teaches you, and I know that people like to use it, but I feel like there's a lot of undoing that when I talk to people that are new to astrology that have CoStar, in their mind they have a lot of, the first impressions of astrology for them is not very functional. So
Yeah.
I would just
Yeah.
like, if you want to pay for an app, the Channing app is amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. And
Not
even
not
I
making money
use,
on that endorsement. I would just say don't pay for
yeah.
it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's funny that because the Channy app, I don't know if you recall, but at one point I saw an interview on a podcast that I love, a podcast called Hysteria, which is on the Crooked Media Network. I'm huge fans of these ladies, and it's a women-driven podcast. It is
It's
awesome. And
yeah,
yeah, yeah, they talk about politics a lot, but they also talk about pop culture and social stuff, and they're great. But they had what is her first name? Is it
it's Channing.
um
Yeah,
Channing?
Channing.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually her name, right?
Yeah,
And she was on their podcast. I think I sent you a link to it because I was fascinated
yeah,
because she was talking about they were talking about the upcoming election in 2024, and she was telling them about all of the major like events that are happening and the conjunctions that are going to happen and how this is going to meet up here and that's going to be right before the election, so be prepared, people.
yeah,
And it was so cool because she was really insightful, really, really intelligent. It was really nice to hear her speak. And I think I downloaded her app about 2 seconds after seeing that interview.
Yeah, that's the good thing is like what she's providing is founded on like very old texts that were recently translated. So it's like it's new information, and we're able to take those techniques and have it be founded in something that's not just conjecture. And
Yeah.
I like her because she delivers it very clearly to people that
Mhm.
don't have astrology as a language yet, you know, or they
Right,
don't ever
right.
want to. They want to have somebody just tell them, you know, you got a Neptune square coming up, you know, or whatever. It's like putting it and explaining what a Neptune square to your nativity could mean and having that sort of preparation instead of like, you know, I guess the hyperbole that um a lot of some astrologers have now is like this is the most epic moon of your life. It's like really,
Really? Is it though?
yeah, is it? Because it was also last month when you said the same thing. And if you do those generalizations and you just like pump everything up, like if you think about your life, like maybe if you're super famous and you're traveling around and you have all these award shows and you're meeting other famous people and you're creating your best work, maybe you have a life that is just on fire all the time, right? But most
Mhm.
of us,
Most of us.
we're gonna have pretty mundane lives, and we're gonna have these nice little peaks of anger and arguments and nice little peaks of joy and connection, and they're going to be punctuated with these points, but you're not going to have the most epic moon of your life every month. It's just not representing life. And so
No.
again, it's why I like traditional Hellenistic astrology, because it speaks more to the truth of the existence. And
Yeah.
reading for other people, I, as the astrologer, get to ask them about these things, and I can be informed of how a certain aspect or a certain transit to a nativity will play out, and I get to kind of collect that information of like, you know, I've talked to another Virgo moon in the third house, and like this is what happened to them. Does that resonate with you at all? Like I get to hold that information as well as the original recipient, helping them understand what that placement means. But I just get more kind of field data, you know, by talking to people.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And that was something that uh when we were preparing for this that you had kind of written to me about was using these techniques that you do they I guess they aggregate, over time because you're just constantly building on this knowledge that you have.
Yeah.
Um and getting to see these, these tiny little details, that you're going to notice because you've seen them so many times.
Mhm.
Um, can you maybe explain for our listeners a little bit more, because you've already started talking about it a bit, but how you use those like past experiences to sort of look into like what's coming up. So like if you know that um this this is the way this person's chart looks, and there's going to be, two of their major important influential planets are going to be aligning in a certain way coming up. How do you kind of like put that together and to create the picture for the person that you're reading for?
Well, so it's the anecdotal experience of me as a reader of clients that's based upon like a ton of books. Like,
Yeah.
and within those books you have you so in a chart you have the chart is separated into 12. They're called houses, or
Mhm.
topos in Greek. They're topics. So there's different house topics on all those 12 places, and the first house is like the ascendant, and that's the eastern horizon. The western horizon is the descendant, where the sun would be setting and the sun would be rising on the ascendant. So the eastern and western horizon of a chart. At the ascendant, when people say like, oh, I'm a Scorpio rising, Scorpio was symbolically rising at the eastern horizon. And so
Mhm.
the Greeks put uh, the most importance on that first house or that rising sign.
Oh,
So your
wow.
rising sign is like at the helm of the ship. It is the one steering the entire thing. And
Gemini.
yeah, so
Oh
it's
dear.
so
That
it when it
explains.
well, what's cool is like, so Gemini, as your rising sign, the ruler of Gemini is actually the one in charge. So Mercury is in charge. So you are mercurially driven. Mercury is the one in charge. He is your chart ruler. And so you would look at, okay, well, who's at the steering wheel? Mercury's at the steering wheel. Now, are there any other planets in that first house? Because any planets that are in the four angles, like think of it as a compass. The first house, and then the seventh house, which is on the other end. And then the
Mhm.
top of your chart is the 10th house, which is usually what people would consider a house of career or how other people see you. It's the highest point in the sky when you were born, is the
Mm.
MC, and most part it lands in the 10th. And then the
Oh,
bottom
yeah.
of the chart is the fourth house. So those are the four anchors of a chart.
Right.
And so the
Yeah,
top,
I'm looking at mine right now
yeah,
as you're
yeah.
describing this.
Yeah, so Gemini rising would have Sagittarius at the seventh house. So Jupiter rules your
Yep.
house of relationships. It's like one-on-one relationships. It's a lot of times signified by your partner. What kind of partner do you have in life, in business and in romance? Um, and then the fourth house is like your anchor to earth, and like the house of parents, your home, your nest, how you are when no one else is home, and then the 10th house is like how people see you, you know, what, what are you known for? That sort of a thing. Now there's other points, the MC and the IC can sometimes switch, like a friend in Norway has her MC in the 11th house just because of the latitude where Norway is versus,
Oh, interesting.
so the
Yeah.
MC points can shift, but you always have a 10th house. You always have every single house in a chart. And so when someone comes to me and they want to ask about a certain area of life, I would start with the chart ruler and see where the chart ruler is.
Mm.
Because if you have Mercury in a certain house that doesn't have a traditional aspect to the first, so it can't see the first, that can speak a lot of like you might feel like you're operating in the dark a little bit, like you're not
Mhm.
doing things in a traditional way. If
Mhm.
you have your chart ruler, in a very powerful position, so if it's in an exalted sign, or if it's conjunct to benefic, so Jupiter or Venus. I mean, there's all these different ways where it can influence the ability of that planet, your chart ruler, to express its significations. That's like the most general way. And so then I would look at, okay, well, if you want to talk about, your money situation, I would look at the second house. Or if you want to talk about your marriage or having children, I would look at the fifth house. If you want to talk about like what you like, if you want to travel overseas, I would look at the ninth house. And I would look at the rulers of those. I would look if there's any planets in those, but all those things. So it's the houses, it's the planets in those houses, and the rulers of the planets in those houses. It's like a kaleidoscope. You kind of look at all three of them together. That's
Mhm.
just your nativity. And then you look at the transits that are happening, and they're also lighting up different parts of your nativity. That's why, like, you and I are both Taurus suns, but our charts
Right.
are very different.
Very different. Yeah.
I know a woman that worked at the co-op. She was born 18 hours and 1 minute before I was born.
Yeah.
We have very different charts. We have
Yeah.
we have the same Saturn, Mars, Jupiter, but we have different rising signs. We have different
Yeah.
moons. We have different Venuses, and
Yeah.
and our lives are very different. So if you see people that were born on the same day, even twins, like a twin is not going to be born at the exact same moment as another twin. There's going to be a few minutes, and so they
Right.
might have the same rising sign. They might have the same moon, but the degree of their ascendant is going to be
It's
affected.
going to be different.
It would be affected. So, like, say Saturn's like the big bad boy, right? Say
Hmm.
Saturn right now is in Pisces, and say you have a 6-degree Pisces rising, and your twin has a 9-degree Pisces rising. You're going to get hit by that transit before your twin. It's going to affect you differently. So it's like
Yeah.
twins. You're going to have every fingerprint is unique. Every nativity is unique. And that's why like doing generalizations is kind of like a joke, because it's like, well, yeah, I'm a Taurus, but I'm Scorpio rising. Like my chart is very
Yeah.
than a Gemini
Yeah.
rising Taurus, or a
Yeah.
Pisces rising Taurus, or a Taurus rising Taurus. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like it's wonderfully complicated, and it is like looking at a kaleidoscope, you know.
Yeah. Because I love that metaphor too, because with the kaleidoscope, there's all the layers that create that one beautiful picture that we see.
Yeah.
And also like a kaleidoscope, it's in a circle. So very
Yeah.
good metaphor. Well done.
No,
I like that.
it's like, you know, it's to me, it's the study of the quality of light, right? So the spring equinox, just archetypally, is like light is overtaking darkness. Like
Yeah.
at the winter solstice in December, it's very dark. It's the darkest time of
Mm.
the year. And in Celtic lore, it's like the Holly King and the Oak King kind of like
Yep.
battle it out and they shift, right? So
Yep.
it's the study of light. It's not the study of the stars necessarily. It's the symbolic studying of the points in the air where light changes. And so and then so the significations of the signs are derived from their relationship to light. So there's a reason
Mm.
why Aries is the one where it's like we won, like we survived the winter, we're jumping
Mhm.
out, it's springtime, like no looking back, it's only going to grow with light. And then Taurus is the continuation of that light of like, okay, Aries, calm down, we've got work to do now.
We've got work to do.
We have all the seedlings to plant, we have all the flowers to smell, like we have to sustain that. And so there's
Yeah.
this like the fixed signs are the sustaining of the light. And then the mutable signs are the ones where light starts to shift a little bit before the turning of the wheel. So
Right.
like if you think about the winter solstice, Sagittarius is a very hopeful sign.
Mhm.
It's like the like Mr. Happy, and they're at the
Mhm.
darkest point of the year. So it's
Yeah.
like, I'm reminded of Sandman, and when Sandman goes to hell to get his helm, he has to deal with Lucifer, the morning star,
Yep.
and he battles with Lucifer, and at the very end, he wins because they're battling with like imagery of like what the story is, like I am this, I am this, I am this, and at the end, the Sandman is like on the ground, and he says, I am hope. And at like the darkest point of the year, it's like hope springs eternal, and that's the
Mhm.
beginning of the return of the light. So when I think about astrology, it's not, oh, I can see, Orion, and Orion is telling me in my ear to do something. It's not that
Mhm.
at all. It's like, in a couple of days we're going to have Imbolc. It's this
Yeah.
point of the light where Imbolc
It's
means,
one of my favorites to celebrate.
I know, it means in the belly, and it's like when the ewes would be pregnant and they would reveal milk and to show that
Mhm.
they were pregnant, and it's like the first fresh food that you would eat after a dark winter. And it's like this beginning of the shift and the turn of the light. And then by the time the spring equinox happens, it's like it just we're nourished from the milk, and now we get to like spring forward with the light. And I think that's why I love astrology, is that it's not like I'm not trying to prove anybody anything. I'm like embracing, witnessing the passage of time through an archetypal lens. And I feel like
Yeah.
you can talk to really anybody about that. I mean, I talked to my 10-year-old son about archetypal things, not just astrology, but thinking about things as stories, because he's going to remember that
Yeah.
versus remember facts. Facts don't
Right.
unless they're rooted in a story.
Yeah. No, and I agree with that too, because I mean, you know, I could barely tell you, remember half of the books I've read in my life, but the ones I read as a child, I have some of them memorized, because when you're studying just for facts versus studying to enjoy or be enlightened, and there's a story that goes along with it, these are the things that we really remember, especially when we're little,
Yeah.
you know, and I mean, I think that's why, you and I both were, well, I didn't have to go to church twice on Sundays, but I was raised Catholic.
Mhm.
And I had to go to church school on Wednesdays and go to church on Sundays. And, you know, there's a reason that children are taught um, with stories, because that's what kids remember,
Yeah.
and when we can take that and put it into all of the areas of our life that kids should know about, I think that's a really beautiful thing. I know you're an amazing mom. I've met your son. He's cool. Like,
Well, it reminds me
you
of
guys are awesome.
I
I just love it.
am a huge fan of Alan Moore, who's a comic book artist. He's a writer for comics, and he wrote
Yeah.
E for Vendetta, and he wrote some of the Swamp Things. He wrote my favorite series, comic series of all time, is Promethea, and it's a 5-book series.
Nice.
Um, but there's this interview with him, like on YouTube, and I watch it every once in a while because he himself is like this magician. And
Yeah.
he has a couple of funny stories about, when he turned 50, he didn't want to disappoint his friends by becoming just a normal midlife crisis old man. He decided to declare himself a magician, and he was like, in his thick, North English accent, like you can just hear him just like grinding through this. And he's like, what I didn't realize is that if you declare yourself a magician, one day you're going to wake up and realize that's exactly what you've become. Yeah. But then he talked about the power of story. And he was like, to
Mhm.
cast a spell is literally to spell, to say words, to use,
Mhm.
Mercury Hermes. I pulled this card today for this.
Yay! That's perfect. That one's my friend. I see that one a lot.
Yeah. And he talks about
For,
like,
for those of you listening, she just showed me the
the
magician card, which in my Green Witch Tarot is the witch.
oh yes, yeah.
So, yep, makes
Um,
sense.
so he talked about, back in olden times, humans have this obsession of like of being immortal. We don't want,
Yeah.
there's a fear of dying. And so
Mhm.
in olden days, if you um, became famous, you could become famous by somebody writing a song, you know, and you could become infamous by somebody writing like a parody about you, about some mishap
Mhm.
you've done. And if it
Yeah.
was a particularly good parody, then people would repeat it for generations. So you would be remembered for being an ass for generations. And
Yeah.
it shows the power of story. Stories, if they're a good story and they get repeated, then the immortality of those characters continues on. And it's only when that story dies is when those people die. And so the
Yeah.
idea of spelling and speaking and like saying the requirements have been fulfilled, like that in itself is like a magical act. And
Mhm.
by looking at your nativity through the language of astrology and speaking it out loud, I feel like has like magical remediation for human suffering and then compassion for our suffering. That's why it's like
Yeah.
I don't tire of talking about this, because it's like it feels like it gets to that heart center of we want to be seen. It's scary to be seen, and
Mhm.
sometimes we don't want to look at the truth, or don't want other people to look at our truth. I mean, it's not an easy thing. It's not light and fluffy unless you use
Yeah.
CoStar. It's not light and fluffy.
Yeah, right. So I had oh God, this conversation is so much fun. I never wanted it to end. I had one other like question I wanted to ask you before we kind of loosen up and talk about some other fun stuff. Um, so you mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation about like planetary returns, right? And you did touch on the solar return, which was something I was a little cloudy on myself. I wasn't because I'm into it, but I have nowhere near the understanding that you do. I'll stick with my cards. But and then try to learn through that, because it's been working. But when you talk about planetary or like a solar return, um, I know you said the solar return is kind of like it's time for like a reset that happens, right? Like if you're the planets that were in with your son when when they come back. Um, can you explain a little bit more in depth to our listeners about how that works and like when we have these different planetary returns,
Mm.
as they come in into cycle for us.
Sure, yeah. So the general term is a timing technique, and it's used to kind of look at what is ahead of time for you. So you can use a solar return, which is like, say you have a 15-degree and 59-minute Pisces sun. So every year that sun is going to find itself at that degree in that minute. But then when you were born, if you were born in 1950, then Venus will be in a particular place, Saturn will be in a particular place. Like all the planets are going to be like on their own thing. But when you turn 75, the sun will return to that exact moment, but all the other planets are going to be in very different stages. And so
Mhm.
you can look at your natal chart, your nativity, and then you can look at your solar return for the year. So like when I read for people and they're looking at like my birthday is next week and I want to look at what my year ahead looks like. That's generally what people want to look at a solar return for. So
Mhm.
say you have that Pisces sun and it's in the first house of self, but in your solar return, it's in the ninth house of foreign travel or of studies or publishing. It's like, well, you're still a Pisces sun, but maybe the theme of your year is going to be a little bit less focused on you as the main character. And maybe you're just going to travel, or maybe even working on a project and you really want to publish it. So you can look at all the other things, it's like, well, you have the sun conjoined Venus, which is like just a Venus cazimi. That means that like they're right at the exact degree. So that can create like a more profitable, like blessed year. Or you have a Sun Saturn opposition. It's going to be like a little bit more resistance in these areas of life, depending on what house the planets are at. So
Mhm.
you can read a solar return chart to kind of just get a vibe of like, how does this one differ from your birth chart? And you can get an idea of the themes that might come up this year versus what's happened your whole life. Um, Now, if you look at like a Mars return or a Saturn return, again, you're going to look at the topics of the house that your Saturn or Mars are in and your nativity. And usually a return is, the planet taking its time. They all have a synodic cycle is what it's called. It's their relationship to the sun. And a return from when you were born to now, it usually means it's like these chapters kind of close so that a new chapter can open. And that's like when I was recently informed, like the year I bought my first astrology book, I had a Mars return. So it was like the beginning of something new. And, you can use those returns. You have, maybe 3 Saturn returns in a lifetime. You only have 1 Uranus return if you lived until 84 years old. No one has a Pluto return because that's like, almost 300 years. Um,
Right.
but you have a lunar return every month. You have a solar
Yeah.
return every year. You have Venus and Mars, Jupiter returns like at different cycles. So if you have a Venus return is kind of like a popular one because Venus is the queen. She says yes to things. She's the empress in Tarot. She's just
She
like
is, yeah.
sensual and she's loving and she's comfortable and soft. And you can have like a inflated Venus that just makes you become a lush, or
Yeah.
like there can be dark sides to too much of a good thing. But for the
Right.
most part, a Venus return is like, yes, like I have Venus in Cancer in the ninth house, and I love my Venus and Cancer returns. It's usually around the summertime, and I usually try to go to a river or a lake or the ocean, and I just float in the glory of this watery, emotionally tapped in, Venus. And in my chart, my Venus and my moon are in reception to each other, so they share each other's rulers. So my body as the moon and my femininity as Venus they're in this like self-fulfilling like feed network. They just like nourish each other. And so I love my
Yeah.
Venus return. Other people may not if they have like a injured Venus, so to speak. Um, most people like enjoy that because it's like a good return. Saturn returns are harder because Saturn
Yeah.
is just harder.
Yeah, yeah,
Way harder,
yeah.
you know.
I've like, because of course I've had my chart sitting here next to me while we've been talking, so I can make my own references. See, I drew it. I'm showing her. You
Nice, yeah.
guys can't see this. Yeah, I used a coaster and a ruler. I didn't have a compass. But yeah, it should not surprise you that my Venus is smack with my sun right in Taurus. So
Yeah.
that's where
The
that's where she
Venus is
be.
at home. Yep.
That's where she be. And she is right next to Mercury. 0 degrees
Yeah.
Venus, 1 degree Mercury, which you I did that's my ship captain apparently. So there we go. Wait, what else do I got in there? There's more. My 12th house is like loaded, dude. Um, Taurus, Sun, Venus, Mars, Mercury, and my Chiron are all in my 12th house. Loaded up.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a similar, but it's in the seventh house. You know, it's
Yeah, yeah.
Sun,
Again, because
Mercury, Moon, Chiron. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and our birthdays are what, like,
I,
wait, we're not the same year though, are we?
no, no.
We're a year apart. But yeah, you're the 12th and I'm the 18th.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought it was really funny because I remember one time, one of our, I don't think she'd mind me mentioning her, I showed Mary Hall my chart once, and she
Mhm.
looked at it and she goes, well, shit.
That is definitely a Mary Hall response for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it was great because she just, and I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, well, no wonder you're so good at your job. And we were at work that day. She's like, oh yeah, Virgo's your north node. Yeah, okay, here you go. Scanning
Yeah.
coordinator. Go scan stuff. Go be organized.
Well, there's other like solar returns are like something that I think some people find familiarity with, but there's so many other timing techniques that were revealed in that translation. And one of them
Mhm.
I find is easy for people to kind of wrap their heads around. So I use it a lot in readings, and it's called perfections. And so, like, say you're Gemini rising, so that first house, you have these 12-year cycles where Gemini or Mercury is your chart ruler for the year. Regardless of your solar return, you can look at it just like, okay, I'm in a 0 year, or I'm in a I'll pull up an example just so I can speak to it a little bit better. But the
Sure,
idea
yeah.
is that for 1 year, a certain act of your or a certain area of your chart is activated. So it makes it so that your whole chart is not on fire at all times, right?
Right, right. Yeah,
Like
that makes
certain
sense.
areas of life, and then the rulers of those houses kind of get to be a bit more important. So, like when you're like a big year is like a 10th house year, right? So your 10th house is like career, how people see you. So when you're
Mhm.
21, 33, 45, 57, and 69, those are when the 10th house is really activated.
Oh, I'm gonna be 45 this year. Boom.
There you go. So
There we go.
you're going into a year where you're going to be more publicly seen, more likely. People are going to your star is going to shine brighter. At the 10th house, it's like the top of the chart, so it's where people you get just more visibility. The opposite end of that is like when you're 15, 27, 39, 51, 63 is the fourth house year. You're insular, you're studying, you're rooting down, you're nesting. It's like the opposite end of not being seen because you're kind of creating the necessary root. The 10th house years are just brighter because you're above ground, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So you can use perfections like, okay, I'm in a 10th house year. Virgo rules your 10th house. So Mercury rules your 10th house. So Mercury is activated, and then also wherever Mercury sits in your chart, so your 12th house is activated. So you can use like, okay, for the year ahead, I need to pay attention to transits to Mercury because he's my Time Lord of the year, the magician.
Yes.
And transits to Mercury are going to be loud for me, and they're probably going to inform my 10th house of career. So you can use that as like, I'm going to pay more attention to when career opportunities come up, because I feel like this is when I'm going to have the most visibility to get that job or create that job. You know, Virgo likes to just do things with their own hands. And so to
Hmm.
create something of your own, that makes you more visible as a career, it's like Mercury's going to go in and activate that. And so
Yeah.
it's a way to kind of look for the year ahead. You compare it to the natal chart, but you can use it like a forward thinking timing technique. There's a bunch of other ones, but those are the ones that it's like you can read about the house, you can read about the planet, and then you can just think about, well, what do I want to do as a career? I do want to change. I've been kind of in a hermitage, and now I want to bring that hermitage to light. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
how.
that actually makes a lot of sense for
Well,
dealing
I
with
like
it.
it because
That's
it's like
kind of
a
great.
functional thing that you can use astrology for. It's not like it's like when you
No.
get a massage and you leave the massage and you're like, well, I mean, I guess I feel okay. It felt good when I was getting the massage, but now I'm not
Yeah.
sitting with anything. And
Yeah.
I want astrology. I want you to leave the astrological massage table with like something that you can carry forward, not I
Yeah.
forgot what she told me or I forgot what I was supposed to do. It's like,
Right.
Andrea Lee, like Mercury is your guy. On your birthday, you enter a Mercury year. And so focus on that. Pay attention to that, right? Put
Yeah.
yourself out there. Activate Mercury likes talking and communication and expression and Mercury is currency. So think about just money itself. I mean, it's going to be way more of a mercurial year as to the year that you're currently in.
Does Mercury like hosting podcasts?
Mercury loves electronics and quantum communication. I mean, Mercury is the trickster. So
Yeah.
that's like when the trope of Mercury retrograde and your car breaks down or your computer goes on the fritz, like that's a mercurial thing, like he's kind of
Yeah.
going in and out, like creating havoc. Yeah, I that's what I like to leave people with is the something that you can grasp onto and carry with you. So you don't have to
Yeah.
be an astrologer and translate all these complicated timing techniques. You can take like an archetype like Mercury and an area of life like career and just like resonate on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's also why I like recording readings and sending the recording to people so that you can go back in a month and listen because
Yeah.
I won't remember. That's the thing. It's like I'll read for people and I'm like,
Right.
they'll be like, don't you remember when you said X and X date? I'm like, nope,
No,
I
because I was
wasn't
in the
supposed to
moment.
hold on to it.
I
It's
was doing my thing.
doing my thing. I
Well,
was like translating in real time, but I
yeah.
can't hold on to that stuff. But they remember and having a
Yeah.
recording where you can go back and listen to it, be like, oh, that's what this means now. Like you can't always grasp it in the moment.
And this is I love that you do that because when I do an occasional tarot reading for like a friend or family member, I'll ask them to take a picture of it
Mhm,
because I'm like, you see this visual in front of you, and we all know we remember words better with pictures. Like
mhm,
you were talking about earlier, tarot has the benefit of having the pictures. So when whenever I do a reading, and I've done some that we did like during the pandemic, there were a couple times I did some for a friend over Zoom or whatever, and I'd just be like, take a screen grab. Like
yeah,
here, I'm aiming my screen at the table so you can see the full spread
yeah,
that I've pulled for you, and and then that way, and then I read through it, and we go through the whole thing, but then they have that picture later, so it's like, oh, now I remember what she told me about that
yeah,
card.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, around the turn of the year, I did kind of like this tarot special, but it was using tarot as the prompts for kind of an astrological. I didn't have the client's astrology chart. I just pulled tarot for them, and so I
yeah,
pull one card to represent each month for the year, and then I
yeah,
photographed
Zodiac, yeah,
them. So like January for one woman, it was the Two of Coins. So I just kind of like talked about the Two of Coins, and then I would go to the Strength card for February or whatever it was. And then as I'm kind of talking about the meanings of these things, I kind of read it as a spread of like, look how January and July are connected. Like in the spread, they're right on top of each other and they're kind of aligned. Or look how
hmm
everything is like all the arrows are pointing to this one card. Like maybe that, like
hmm
just looking at it as a spread itself. and I recorded it, and they would be from like 20 minutes to an hour, depending on like how much information I felt like I needed to give. And then I
Yeah,
would find that the story would kind of reveal itself. Like I would
it
just
does.
pull and pull and pull and pull, and then I would look at it. And so sending people that as like an audio calendar that you can go back and listen to. You can print the calendar off, but also
Mhm.
just like pay attention to April. And that's actually something that I'll tell everybody listening. April is going to be a pretty loud month. Just astrologically, there's lots of things that want to express themselves are going to express themselves. There's eclipses that are happening, and there's some conjunctions of pretty show-offy planets. I'll say that. So
Mhm.
I pulled the world card. No, I pulled the wheel
Mhm.
for so many people for April. And again, I'm not choosing it, it's coming out.
Oh yeah, no,
It made
they
me crack
demand to
up.
be spoken to. Yeah.
It made me crack up so much. I was like, oh yeah, the wheel again for April. Like the wheel itself is like all of tarot. It's like anything could happen, literally.
Anything can happen.
Yeah, it's like as long as
Anything
you
can
just
happen.
stay on the wheel, you'll be good. You might be going up, you might be going down. But the fact
Yep.
that I pulled the wheel for April, it really sticks with me that I think across the board, there's going to be big um, this is like the most epic month of the year. I think April's going to
Yeah.
be just very loud for
Yeah.
across the world. And I don't mean that like it's going to be bad or good. I just think it's going to get our attention, regardless of
Yeah.
what happens. And I hope that it's all really positive shift, but I don't know.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
one of the planets that's involved is Uranus, and Uranus is sometimes symbolizes like a lightning bolt, and sometimes that lightning bolt can be like that amazing aha moment that you get in meditation of like, oh my god, I never
Oh, there it is.
had
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
super idea. Or it's like a lightning bolt can also hit a plane wing and make it to cause to crash. It's
Yeah.
like across the gamut. It's like lightning can be lightning is just like that really concentrated flush of energy to a very specific point. And so that's why I say I can't really predict it. It's going to be good or bad. I just think
Yeah.
that it's going to be clear that
Yeah.
when things happen, and as a not to scare people, but to kind of just pay attention in your own life, or in first full week of April. I think it's like the 10th through the 21st, that middle of
Oh yeah.
um
I'm looking at
it
my
might
calendar.
just
Yeah.
be like invigorating and like people talking more. I feel like we're gonna I joke around, I feel like we're gonna talk faster. I know that sounds
Mhm.
crazy, but I feel like we're going to just speed up our processing, our internal processing as humans, and be able to just react and respond and communicate and come out of this seemingly sleepy post. Like I feel like that's when we leave the post COVID mindset.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, yes, people are still dying of COVID. I'm not trying to do that, like to dissuade or um to make little of people's current experience right now on January 27th. People are dying of COVID, definitely. But the whole cultural collection of COVID times, I feel like will end and this year, and we will start to think of 2024 as kind of a new space. We'll think of it
Yeah.
in 100 years' time. They're going to look back at this time period and see, like when we think of like the 1900s, things really changed in the 1920s. Like we had
Hmm.
cars, the technology really increased. The way we fought
Yeah.
wars really radically changed. There was so much more immigration all over the world. So it's like things like from 1900 to 1920, it was still kind of like the 1800s,
Yeah. Yeah.
horses and like the the first wave feminism of the 1880s or earlier really had kind of fizzled out. But in the 1920s, like women just started to wear pants, and it
Yeah.
seems silly,
Yeah.
but it's like that was a big shift,
It was huge.
huge shift. And that's how I feel like 2024 is going to be. It's going to be the beginning of a big shift. And maybe it starts to really kind of show itself in April. Maybe we'll like uncover that there's a wizard behind the curtain for AI. It's like an actual dude that's doing it all. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it could
Pay
be
no attention to the man behind the curtain.
like the theory that all around the world, like different people can get the same idea at once and invent the one thing that like really radically shifts, like microplastics. That's what I was like, can someone ask Chat GPT how to deal with microplastics in the ocean? Because that would be a functional use of it, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
I just feel like
exactly.
April has the capacity to really redirect us. And the eclipses are part of that. Eclipses are great beginnings and great endings. And I can't predict if it's good or bad. I think it's just going to be clear to everyone.
Yeah, yeah, I love that.
Good luck to us all.
Good luck to us all. You heard it here first, folks. Watch out for April. Um, something's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Something's gonna happen. So for a little bit of fun here, for the end of our recording, I think we did touch on a lot of this, but maybe we can make it a little rapid fire because we did talk about some of this already. So quick 5 questions for my favorite astrologer. Um, what is the deal with Mercury retrograde? You touched on that a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Things break, computers stop working, couldn't get the printer hooked up properly. What is the deal with Mercury retrograde?
Well,
Because it
Mercury
happens like twice a year, doesn't it?
3 times
Sometimes
a year. Yeah.
3 times a year. Yeah, yeah.
And there's like the shadow period, which means like it's Mercury will station, meaning it slows down and kind of stops moving forward, and then it will retrograde back to a certain degree. So say it retrogrades back to 5 degrees Sagittarius, and then it goes forward. Well, before it goes retrograde, when it leaves Scorpio and goes into Sagittarius, when it hits 5 degree, that's the beginning of the shadow. So imagine it's like
Mm,
the umbrella is up in, creating a shadow for us, but we get into the shadow maybe before we get under the actual umbrella. The umbrella itself is the retrograde, but the shadow is cast on either
gotcha.
side of it, you know?
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so when you get into the shadow period and out of the shadow period, it makes it for that, like a lot of the year, we are always under some sort of mercurial retrograde or shadow period. It happens just a lot. Mercury is the fast planet. The moon the moon orbits us. It doesn't orbit the sun specifically, it orbits Earth.
Right.
And so Mercury is the fastest planet that orbits the sun. And because of
Right.
the ecliptic of where all the planets cross the horizon line of the sun, it appears that it goes slower when it kind of makes these turns, right? So
Yeah.
the planet is still orbiting exactly how it is. It's just the appearance. So it looks different from our point of view. It looks like it goes still and it looks like it's going backwards. It's not. Again, it's the archetype of what does it mean to kind of slow down and reset. So
Mm,
a word retrograde, it begins with RE, and I always think of words. It's like you have to go back and remember, restore.
mm.
You just have to return to something to make it go better. Because if you were always going forward in one direction, you're never checking your work. You're just going forward.
Ah,
Mercury
yeah.
retrograde just makes you kind of, it forces your hand sometimes. And a lot of times mercurial people like yourself suffer more because it's your chart ruler. So it's like he kind of goes back and forth. Um, it's like that's the deal with Mercury retrograde. It's like it happens more than any other planet because it's the fastest moving planet. So it goes through cycles a lot quicker than all of the other ones. That's how why we hear about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that makes perfect sense. And we just have to, because as we mentioned earlier, we used to work together and we know what would go on in that office during the Mercury retrograde. It's like,
Yeah.
the printer is not working again,
Yeah.
and I had to fix it. So,
Mercury did get
but
his steward to fix his machine.
yeah, I guess a Mercury's bitch. I had to fix the
Well,
machine.
and just real quickly, last summer I was like Hollywood breakups. Like everybody was
Oh, yeah.
last summer was a Venus retrograde. So it was like going back and like thinking about like reevaluating your relationships. And when people were forced to do that, they kind of were like, no, I don't like you anymore. So
Wow.
if you think about, and Venus was in retrograde for a long time over the summer. And it was like the summer of breakups for a lot of people, a lot of famous people. So it's like,
Yeah.
that's an example of how a return or retrograde can express itself through the significations of the planet that's being retrograded. So Venus
Yeah.
as romantic relationships,
Yep.
it expressed itself when it went retrograde.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good case in point. Very
It's
good
called
case in point.
hashtag astrology good. It doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It just means that astrology was good to warn people of that, you know.
Yeah, right. So, we did touch on this a little bit at the beginning too, but your thoughts on the like daily, weekly, like the newspaper style horoscopes, not the CoStar app, which we know we don't like, but yeah, like the news, like 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 the stuff that we grew up on, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, those are actually really hard to write because, you know, while you and I are both Taurus suns, most people read the sun sign, but
Hmm.
using Hellenistic astrology, the rising sign speaks more to the character of the individual. And so if you were going to read weekly horoscopes or daily horoscopes, one, I love Rob Bresney. I think his are the best because they are stories and they're kind of more archetypal and not like, don't play the lottery, Sagittarius. You know, they're not
Right, yeah.
a lot of that. They seem like they're like AI generated or just complete BS. But even if it's a legitimate astrologer writing, it's very hard to write. If you were going to read for it, for you, I would read Gemini. I would not read Taurus. And for me,
Hmm.
I would read Scorpio. I would not read Taurus because
Yeah.
if you're going to use that, or read all of them, but maybe read your sun, moon, and rising, your big three. But I
Hmm.
find that the rising sign might speak more to your experience than the sun sign necessarily were, unless you were the same. If that your sun sign was your rising sign, then that might hit. But I think it's hard. It's so general. But for entertainment purposes, sure, you know.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that too, because even before I knew about like which you just educated me a lot about my own chart, even through this conversation. But I always used to read Taurus and Gemini because I'm a cusp, because my birthday is on the 18th.
Yeah,
And I always knew at least that much about my chart. So like I would always read Taurus and Gemini.
yeah.
And then when I found out I have the Aquarius moon, I would read Aquarius as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's really cool. I like that. So and you've mentioned some folks that you are really into. Who are a couple of your real favorite like astrologers? Like who you really look up to?
So I read Demetra George is my favorite, like living Hellenistic astrology writer. So I love her books. The astrology podcast by Chris Brennan is excellent. And if you didn't want to pay for a school, you could get a school level education just from his lectures. Now he has an online school, it's a recording. I'm in school at Nightlight Astrology, which is taught by Adam Ellenboss. He was an amazing astrologer himself. He has the Nightlight Astrology podcast and YouTube channel. I have favorite ones that don't necessarily teach, but they do lecture series. Kira Ryberg is an amazing astrologer. She's very young. Like I think she's just in her first Saturn return now, but this woman is incredible. And I can't wait to like watch her grow because she's just such a wealth of very humble and like knowledge that she's sharing. Um, those are the ones that I kind of reference the most. And then there's like I'm in a cohort of students that we're all at different stages of life all over the world. And I'm reminded that just like there's every type of person on earth, there's an astrologer for every type of person on earth. And so I
Mhm.
have just personal favorites from seeing their journey to coming to astrology. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. It's at Practical Astros, and that's all it is. I have like my personal social media, and then Practical Astros is all astrology all the time, 24. And I engage with a lot of really great astrologers on there. S.J. Anderson and Dan Waits are two of my favorites. Nick Dagan Best, Patrick Watson, um, Bad Pastor is a really great astrologer.
Oh, I've actually heard of that one. Yeah.
Yeah, Sam Reynolds is amazing. I mean, there's so many great astrologers practicing. Um, Kelly Surtees is another one. I feel like I'm at a award show trying to like thank everybody that's influenced. Um, There's like, and if you want to go like the magical route, there's Christopher Warnock has written a bunch of really beautiful magical books.
Oh yeah, I've heard it. Yeah, yeah.
And then if you're a Vedic, there's like really great Vedic astrologers. Um, Vic Dakara on YouTube is like my favorite Vedic astrologer. He's kind of a rebel Vedic. He's not like the usual Vedic astrologer. So there's so many out there, and with social media as it is now, you can access all sorts of different resources for it. But my Twitter page mostly is like I want to be like the gathering place and the bulletin board for pretty much all astrologers, and
Mhm.
even the trolls. I just like come on, that's like it's all of life. Everyone can engage here as long as you're not being a total ass. I will let you play, and
Yeah.
it's like my astrology philosophy is a rising tide lifts all boats. And so as long as we're like always talking about astrology and
That's
treating each
great.
other respectfully and compassionately, let's all just like keep rising the awareness of it and the utilization of it, and retain the joy and the jolly and the magic and the seriousness, because it is representing life just like tarot, and I've had success there. It's good to just be like, everybody come over to my house and chat. I'll
Y-
host. I'll put
Yeah.
in topics you can like discuss amongst yourselves. But I
Yeah.
love like holding that space.
Discuss.
And people like to engage. It's like astrology can be kind of a lonely practice because a lot of it
Mhm.
is you with your head in a book and frantically writing notes before your head explodes.
Mhm.
And even engaging in a client, you're still translating it for them. And so to have a place where you can chat about your techniques, you can learn things, you can argue, um, but argue in a language that not other people speak, because
Yeah.
astrology as a language is like it's not as popular as maybe the astrology bubble world would like to think. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just refreshing to have that. So I'm thankful for all of the people that I've learned from and all the people that continue to teach me every day. Like I've got a group of students, Sonia, Shauna, and Janessa, and we host these events. And I'll send you the link to it because we're actually
Oh
hosting
yeah, please.
one tomorrow. But
That'd
we
be great.
host these events just before each Sabbath to kind of talk about the astrology of the season, to talk
Mhm.
about there's like a meditation on it that's led by one of the she's a mindfulness coach, and there's like I give like recipes and like how to make a Bridget's cross and like all these, it's like these
Oh yeah.
how-tos, but
I
we're
make Bridget's bread.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a seasonal pause to just think about what the season means to carry forth until the next Sabbath. And just having that sister cohort of other astrology students that we're all at different stages, but we all come together with like the eagerness to share and to support each other. Like that kind of connection with other astrologers has been like the secondary blessing on top of just being able to read for people, which is definitely the top. So
I love it.
that was a
I love it.
long-winded, quick
No,
answer.
no, it's fine. Like I said, feel free to elaborate as much as you like. So I guess because I had two more questions, but we totally answered one of them already in depth. But um, one last cute one for you. What's your favorite tarot style?
What do you mean? Like
Like
spread
a
or
yeah, yes. Well, it could be a spread um or well, I know we talked earlier about how you and I don't read reversals, so we don't. Um, but yeah, maybe like your favorite spread or like how you like to when you when you are doing a tarot like for yourself,
Mhm.
what would be your go-to? Maybe that's a better question.
I usually use three, and
Yeah, I do too.
I'll kind of phrase it with like, what's informing me in this moment, or what am I coming to the spread with in this moment, or what has
Mhm.
influenced me, or where have I come from? It's like a past, present, future, roughly. Um,
Yeah,
or I'll pick like, show me the center card will be like, show me the situation. And then the
yeah,
cards
yeah.
on either side will be like, show me if I chose yes, show me if I chose no.
Hmm.
Usually three cards. But the Grand Cross spread I
Mm.
never resonated with until I met a woman um, who she took the spread and then she turned it on its side so that the wheel was at the top, basically.
Oh,
And
and then the four were on
and
the
then
bottom.
this was the road. And so the wheel would
Ah,
turn on the road. And the way that she just visually shifted it for me helped me understand really how to draw a spread like that better. Because at first I was like, this goes here and then here and then here and here. There's these four.
yeah,
It never
yeah,
made sense. But as a whole, I do three. Um,
yeah,
sometimes, and this happens a lot, I'll be like, um, I want a major arcana today. Like, what major arcana wants to come through? And like 10 out of 10, a major arcana will come out.
yep,
Another tip that I'll give people with tarot, sometimes it's hard to just be at the mercy of whatever the fates have for you that day. Like if you feel really like, I just want to be in charge of one thing, I tell people to look at the cards when they pick and let the image jump out to them. You don't have to be at the mercy of this random card. You can flip through it and be like, you know what? I really want the moon today. And the moon is
yeah,
not an easy card, but if you
yeah,
pick the moon, you get to have that agency of choosing it. And you
yeah,
and to me, it like that is an empowering thing. If you don't have to turn the cards upside
yeah,
down, you don't have to
yeah.
flip them. You can let the card jump out of the deck because that happens a lot.
That happens too. Yeah, especially when we shuffle. When I I um I will always take note of I call it a jumper. Yeah. Always take note of the jumper when you're shuffling. I did a I did a zodiac check-in spread for myself about a month ago. And so, you draw 12 cards to represent each of the signs, right? And so it's just kind of like a check-in as to where you're at the moment.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting because as I was shuffling, the Ace of Wands jumped out.
Mm,
And so, and like you were just saying about how that reader shifted the spread for you and it made a
yeah.
little more sense. I do that a lot too. I typically draw three cards for like a check-in.
Mhm.
And kind of like you, I'm kind of like, it's like, where am I at right now? And then I kind of read the side cards as to what's going on right
Yeah.
now. And sometimes I will pull a fourth card for clarity,
Mhm.
which typically does end up being a major art, for some reason.
Yeah.
Um, and I when I did the zodiac spread, so I just put the Ace of Wands in the middle, and then I put the
Mm,
rest of the cards around it to be the zodiac wheel. And I was like, oh yeah. Yeah, that made perfect sense because as I was going through and making my notes about each card and everything, and then I finished with my jumper because I
mm,
put it at the center
mm.
and it completely drew the whole reading
Yeah.
together. I was
Yeah.
like,
Love that.
oh, that makes so much sense. Like,
Yeah.
always pay attention to the jumpers, folks. You got to. If you
And
have a
sometimes if it
draw your
jumps
three
out,
cards, but if the jumper jumps out, you got to read it.
yeah, I'll read it. And sometimes I'll be like, I will deal with you later.
Yeah, sometimes you have to.
I'll be like,
Yeah.
no, son, you are not allowed in this situation. So I'll keep him in the back of my mind, but I'll be like, you just hold.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll
Yeah,
pull you more.
you just wait a minute. You're being a little too antsy here, buddy.
I will
Yeah.
suggest, like, if you get a card that you don't like the answer, don't pull a second card for the same question, because
Mm-mm.
that's when like confusion really starts to set in. And I feel like if tarot itself is just your inner spirit or your inner daimon or your connection to the gods, if you start to be disrespectful, because that's what it is, of like, I don't like that, I'm going to pull another card. I've had people ask me that, like, can you pull a card to see like what my boyfriend's doing? I'm like, nope,
Nope.
they're not in the room. I'm not going to pull a card for them. Or they'll ask me the same question. I was like, okay, well, what if I asked it this way? It's like still the same question. You can't
Yeah,
I don't care that you don't like the answer. You can ask like, what will support me in this? That's a different question.
that's a different
But
question.
if you pull a card because you didn't like the answer, then you're just going to start to get confused because they're not going to like it. Whatever they
Yeah,
is,
no,
I don't know yet, but they're not going to like it.
they're not gonna like it. No, and I mean, I've definitely had times where, um, I'll do my three and I'm like, "Ugh, all right, you know, and and then I'll just be like, when I go to maybe pull that card for clarity, it's like, okay, just tell me what I need to do. And that's when that card comes out and it's like, yeah, you got this,
Yeah.
but be warned, you know, like just
They're like,
because
well, I don't
sometimes.
like these. So like, what can you help me in this situation, or what support can I call in, or what actions should I take to avoid the situation? Whatever it is,
Mhm.
like if you don't like the answer, just get creative with what can empower you. But
Yeah,
yeah, I suggest that don't ever pull for people not in the room that you don't have their permission. Even for
right.
be like, hey, can I pull some cards for your story? And they're like, of course, anytime. I'm like, I'm gonna ask every time.
Every time.
Every
Yeah.
time it's like you may not want me to peer into this situation for you.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to ask if I didn't like this card, if I didn't like the magician, I'm not going to be like, well, I want, oh, you know what? Well, I got the 5 of Cups instead. So way to go, like
Yeah, right. Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
deserve for asking me, you know? Um,
No, that's so true. I also would never pull cards for anyone without their express wishes for me to do so. Because
I
yeah,
feel like there was
I
enough
respect
tarot in
it.
this. Like you could like edit out all the tarot talk and have a tarot episode and then just
Yeah,
astrology.
I know, probably.
We've talked for almost 2 hours at this point.
I
Sorry.
know. No, it's great. Hey man, I'll do what I gotta do, but this is a fantastic episode. So with that being said, I'll wrap up. So guys, I want to thank everybody for listening to this fantastic conversation with my wonderful friend Krista. I'm gonna have her links in the show notes. You'll be able to find her at practicalastros.com and by those same handle on Twitter and Instagram. So we'll have those links in our show notes. You can find us, Name of Pod, on YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio at this point. Hopefully with more to come. So, Krista, thank you so much for being here today. I know we're going to talk again soon, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much.